Okay. Hey.
Hi, welcome to this first webinar of 2020 that I'm going to be hosting at least. It's all about brand SERPs, and I've got three amazing guests to talk about my favorite topic, which is brand SERPs. What appears when somebody searches your brand name? And what I love to say about this is who searches your brand name? Anybody who's important to your business, and that's clients, prospects, journalists, partners, maybe investors, but also your existing clients. So we're going to talk about that today. What do people see and what you can do to make it look much better? Google is your new business card. What people see when they search your brand name affects the way they think about you fundamentally. It's like when you walk into a room at a party, first 2 seconds, they really count. So we've got Dixon Jones, John Morabito, and Jono Alderson. I'm going to introduce you very quickly. I'll start with Dixon. We last met at Brighton, and you were talking about the knowledge graph, looking at Brighton Pier, and it was a lovely conversation. You're in Wales.
That's right. I am. I'm sitting in I'm actually sitting in my hallway because I wanted the best internet connection I could get, and I had to hardwire into the router. We've just had a massive, great big storm outside. I'm in Snowdonia, and it's storm Barnard or somebody, or Bernard. Brendan, not Bernard.
Well, I'm Barnard.
So I've been in the industry for 20 years. Most people probably know me from Majestic and Inlinks, but I had an SEO consultancy before that. Happy to be here, and hello everybody.
Yeah, I mean, what's happened recently for you is you've moved from Majestic to Inlinks, and Inlinks is all about entities and brands as entities.
Yeah, I've invested in this one, and I found that my modus operandi is find a genius that knows how to program stuff that's cleverer than me, and make sure he owns more, or he or she owns more of the company than I do. So Fred is a genius, and I just take all the credit, really, because I'm the front guy. But yeah, he's built a knowledge base, a knowledge graph, a system that can create knowledge graphs out of any set of websites, and also has a knowledge base, and then we can tile that together so we can see topics and also brands. We can identify a brand as independent to a different kind of topic, such as a geographical area or a thing as well. And so those brands then, can be understood.
Which is absolutely perfect. In our Hummingbird world, we're talking about entities. And Jono, you're super expert in schema markup. And what I love about schema markup is it really is entities, name value pairs. That's your thing, isn't it? And you dream about this at night.
Yeah, I do. I'm not sure that's necessarily a healthy or good thing, but I genuinely spend quite a number of evenings falling asleep thinking about how different bits of schema and different entity representations stitch together and work. Yeah, it's a big part of what I've been doing at Yoast for the last year and a half or so, is trying to work out how you build systems and design them that automatically write that logic. So Dixon on one side is working out what the heck is this page about and what's in it and what are those things. And I'm trying to solve the other side of that to say, okay, now how do we draw the lines between those? And then when Google's got that, where it knows what all those things are and the relationships between them, it becomes very, very easy for them to use that information to decide what they rank, or to show some of the kind of rich content we'll talk about later, or to do all sorts of other stuff. So yeah, I think this is really exciting. It's a huge part of what SEO becomes into the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, what I love is that you turned up at Yoast and they said, "What do you want to do?" And you said schema, and that's the most boring thing I can think of. But it's incredibly simple. You've been doing this for a year, and what I see is that you're defining how schema markup is written.
Yeah.
I copy you. Basically, I copy paste everything that Yoast pushes out, and I use that. Is that a good tactic, do you think?
I hope so. Well, this is one of the big challenges of what I've been doing. Is that there's a lot of this is there aren't really any rules. This is brand new territory. There are some documentation bits about how it should work and how it should be structured, but there's very little about how it should function in the real world. Like, there's some great documentation that says here is what a recipe is, but there's nothing about, okay, what happens if this recipe has no ingredients, or if it's got 2 images rather than 1, and all of these bits of context. So we're trying to work out how the business logic of schema works. Yeah, and I hope we're getting it right. Nobody's complained so far, and in fact, increasingly we are wading into things like the very schema definitions themselves, doing stuff with Google, and we're winging it, but we're doing a great job, I think.
Yeah, no, I love that. And if a recipe has no ingredients, that's your nightmare, yeah?
It's not a great recipe, but no, you can think there might.
It's
be
a recipe for disaster, surely.
Well, it might be a recipe for something that's not food, right? And this is a really good example of something that spec hasn't really anticipated. You might have a recipe for changing the oil in a car, and that's a subtly different thing. And we've got to answer questions like, okay, how do we describe that using schema language?
Okay, brilliant. So we've got the entity expert, we've got the schema expert, and now we're going to talk to John, who is the brand SERP expert. You're the first person I met who is almost as interested as I am in brand SERPs. And I think you do actually a better job in the sense that I only focus on exact match brand SERPs, i.e. what turns up when you search my brand name or my personal brand name, and you go much wider.
Yeah, well, thank you for that introduction. I like to nerd out about not only like, excuse me, our brand names, but what are those searches that maybe even if there's no apparent search volume, our tools tell us 10 to 0 or whatever, but we know that they have to be an important question. Something like, my brand name plus shipping, or my brand name plus return policy, or my brand name plus contact information. Whether or not there's a return on the other end of that query, or whether or not there's a customer, either way, there's someone who really matters to our brand. And those are the types of queries I like to think about.
Yeah, and that's kind of a lot of that is the after sales or the just about to buy query.
Right. Lower funnel or after sales, I say is absolutely a place I like to spend a lot of time thinking. I think SEO probably doesn't spend a whole lot of time thinking about after sale anyway, right? And so there's probably opportunity for us to use what is the #1 marketing channel for driving traffic to our clients' websites to also retain that traffic and to further convert that traffic. Yeah.
No, that's a brilliant way of placing it. So today we're focusing on exact match brand searches, and we're going to do another webinar. John's going to be back for that, for the things you're more obsessed about. But to start with, John's going to present to us brand SERPs. What are they? Why are they interesting? Off you go, John.
All right. So, as everyone knows, right, the title of today's presentation is Google is your new business card. Are you all able to see my screen now? Because I've only got one. All right, great. All right, so what are brand keywords? So in this case, we're talking about brand keywords are those that either include your brand name, your product names, or your domain name. And as Jason said, for the purposes of today's webinar, we're going to primarily focus on those that are exclusively your brand name, the exact match brand SERP. So in that regard, right, this is your first stop. Google is your new business card, and your brand SERP is really that first stop within that. So search your brand name and take a look at what you see. What types of features are there? Do you like what you see? That's really kind of the crux of what we're going to discuss today. But before we talk about that, let's talk about why it's actually important that we are optimizing for these brand queries. To sort of set this up, I'm going to share a quote with you. So this quote is from Amir Kasai, and it goes, "A brand is not a product or a promise or a feeling. It's the sum of all of the experiences you have with a company." So when we think about the way that people first experience our brand, that's very often first through Google search. So what type of experience are we delivering for our customers? So we talked now a little bit more about, why should we be optimizing for these queries? So the first answer, or the first sort of key point here, is the fact that they very often, or in fact almost always, represent an owned or already aware audience. Right now I'm speaking to you from a marketing agency where we do a lot of stuff beyond SEO to essentially grow brand awareness, to make people aware of our brand. Well, once we've achieved that, what is the sort of common behavior? very often people will go to Google and search that brand. So what are we doing on the SEO side of things to make sure that we're effectively capturing that sort of newly owned audience? People who are brand aware or people who are searching your brand terms are very likely to convert. In 2012, Google ran a B2B case study that showed that conversions for brand terms was twice as high as non-brand. I think if you were to look at that in like a consumer setting, that you would find that that is even higher in terms of the sort of offset there, or the delta between those two areas. So, again, if you talk to any of your PPC colleagues, right, they'll tell you that the highest converting campaigns they have in their ad campaigns are almost always their brand campaigns. So we know that these convert at a much higher rate. We also know that it's harder for our competition to steal and own these terms. Generally, it's easy for us to rank for these terms. Oftentimes, it's more of a question of not are we ranking, but is the right stuff ranking? Is the right page ranking? Is the right title tag ranking? Am I communicating the right things? Now, the other interesting stuff about the way that brand search impacts perhaps non-brand search is this concept of how they can affect search suggest and related searches. So in this example here, Jono, I'm sure is happy to see, we do a search for WordPress SEO. And within the search results, Yoast is virtually synonymous with this concept of WordPress SEO.
That's a fix.
That's years of hard work, but mostly before my time, sadly.
And I would even argue that WordPress SEO Premium is also people talking about you guys, right? And so this is a search that very clearly communicates to Google that there is an entity connection between this non-brand term and this other term, in this case, Yoast, right? Yoast tied to WordPress SEO. Again, I sort of hit on this, but we really believe that there is an entity connection. When you see a higher number of searches, there's a patent that Google has that basically indicates that they might be using some signals around higher occurrences of a non-brand query that might then in turn lead to connection for a brand query, for terms for a brand query that then might lead to higher rankings for non-brand terms that are related to that. So let's say that you're going into the Yoast website all the time, right? And then later on, you come back and you search something SEO related, and Yoast has an answer to that thing. That then might be ranked higher up in the search results, and that also is connected to personalization.
And Yoast is an absolutely lovely example because you've got the association of Yoast with WordPress and Yoast with SEO. And Yoast, presumably from what you're saying, ranks better because Google understands those two associations.
This is how I interpreted and read the patent and how I feel things are actually going. Although I'm super open to hearing about how others feel about that. But yeah, so, yes, Jason.
Well, I mean, Dixon's based his whole business on this, so he's desperately hoping it is true. I mean, but I think we all agree Google is understanding better and better, and thanks to Jono's schema markup and Dixon's understanding of how it all works, Google is putting the pieces together and making these associations, which means all these brands are being pushed into their correct ontology or category, which helps them rank better because they're being understood within the context of what it is they do. So we all need to explain to Google who we are and what we do.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, whether it's a discussion of brand or not, that's kind of what we're here to do, right? We're here to SEOs make that which is not explicit, because the search engines actually need us to do that.
Love it. Dixon, sorry, very quickly, Dixon was desperate there.
Well, I was actually. It's just that slide that you had is an interesting slide, John, because if you use Google Trends now, it kind of has a sort of the same sort of suggest thing, but it also says whether they're suggesting a search term or whether they're suggesting a topic or entity. So that's a really useful tool to go and have a look at, because probably the last time we all looked at Google Trends, we were looking at keywords, but now it's saying whether it's showing a keyword or an entity, and if you try and compare different things, you can actually compare an entity with a keyword, with topic, and do yourself a lot of damage. But it makes it clear which one you're using, so it's worth looking out.
And incredibly quickly, sorry to keep interrupting, but that idea of topic and ontology, Bill Straussy was pointing out to me that within images, that's where we see it first. And within Google Images, if you search for your brand name within Google Images, you can immediately see what ontologies, what categories Google is seeing you as associated with, and that's incredibly powerful as an insight into how Google is understanding you.
Absolutely. So now that we know why these keywords are important, let's talk a little bit about setting the stage for doing what I call a branded search audit. This is one of those sort of deliverables that I added to our agency toolkit a couple years ago because I felt like it was something that maybe we weren't looking at enough. So the first thing that you want to do is ask, what is the ratio of your branded search? We've dealt with websites that have 98% branded search, and I've dealt with websites that have 98% non-brand. So get a sense of what your ratio of brand to non-brand queries are so that you have a better understanding. Also, are you measuring the growth of your brand queries? Are we measuring monthly search volume? Are you measuring in Search Console your queries separate, brand and non-brand separated out, looking at year-over-year growth? This is something that I've found to be critical to having a better understanding of where brand sits within the importance of a brand and how it's trending. And then top queries. So in this particular example, this is purely just an export of my top queries from Google Search Console, throw it into Excel, make a pretty graphic, and here we go. Awesome brand is the #1 keyword. And again, for the purposes of today, we're going to talk about what we can do to focus on and optimize that. But my point is that, there's a whole world of other terms out here that have their own intent latent within them, that we can better understand what that user wants from us as a brand, and we can better deliver on that promise by making sure that whatever is ranking at the top of that page satisfies that need. So once you have your top queries, you'll go to the search results and actually execute searches on those. And as we talked about earlier, start to ask yourself, do I like what I see? Some of the other questions you might ask would be like, are all of these pages that work? I've seen instances where we have 404s ranking for a branded query. Does the title tag and meta description here adequately speak to the intent that the user has, right? And are we satisfying that user's intent? What about task completion, right? Does this page help the user to complete the task that they elected to sort of search for? But then what about subsequent tasks after that? These are important things, not just for ranking, but also for like making that page useful for our users. So guys, what are some of the other questions that you might ask here, looking at your SERP to try to figure out if things are done correctly?
I had a really quick question about intent. I mean, the idea of intent, and Jono, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, is my intent as a potential client is to discover more about the company or the brand. And as an existing client, it's to navigate just to my site.
Right.
So that intent is very different. Jono, please.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this earlier. I think if you, unless you're buying something completely inconsequential like a packet of crisps, you're going to think about the money you're spending, and you're going to think about the time you're spending. And we as SEOs think in this bubble that people search, they see a list of results and they pick one, or they take one impression. Actually, people search multiple times in multiple different ways, and they use the sum of that experience to make a decision. So they're seeing this from lots of different directions. And quite early on in that research journey, they might be checking the opening hours of a store, or whether it's nearby, or whether it exists. Later on, they might be trying to mitigate risk. They'll be looking for returns policies and warranties and sorts of things. So it's not enough just to win for the attractive direct match brand queries for the people who write at the point of purchase, but you need to be answering all of those questions, because chances are those aren't different people making different decisions. It's all part of one decision-making process. So yes, there are lots of different intents, and it's quite hard to optimize for all of it, but these are individual people going through journeys and stages. So you need to convince them from all those different angles.
Yeah, and somebody who's searching for my brand name, it could be anywhere in that process. What I need to do is make sure that when they search my brand name, what comes up is relevant and is valuable to them. Dixon, do you agree with that? I hope so.
Yeah, I do. But there's another side to it, I think. Sorry, my brain was on a slightly different track. But in that, when you're putting in a brand, the larger the brand, the less likely it is that you're thinking about a commercial decision. Sure. If you think about a brand like Microsoft, the perfect example, really. You put in Microsoft, there's going to be a huge number of things that could be going on as to why you're looking at that. And it's not because you want to buy Office 365. It's not because you want to buy a PC today. It's probably a combination of a whole load of things, but most likely it's to do with something in the news. It might be something to do with the share price of Microsoft. It might be something to do with who the new CEO is. There's a lot of things going on with a big brand. And to the things like sitelinks and those kind of things, it's not just about when it's Jason Barnard brand, which is very, very valuable, but very valuable to you. But again, when they type in Jason Barnard, they're not trying to buy Jason Barnard. I understand that you're not for sale.
Well, yeah, I am for sale, but that's another completely different question. But I like that idea. And the question as well is, how many people from Microsoft or sufficiently big companies are going to be watching this webinar? The answer is probably none. So we're looking at this situation.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised. There's a lot of people on the webinar.
Okay. Yep. Sorry,
hey, everyone.
But the thing is, we're looking at, I would say, impressing at our level, but maybe I'm just not looking big enough. When somebody searches my name, what I found with my clients is that they search my name and they sign the contract without discussing anymore, because what they see on the brand SERP, my personal brand SERP, is impressive.
Well, you're lucky, because I was going to do a really bad review for you, which no, I'm kidding. No, but I think there's the that's important, and but all those things that are around that brand, beyond the actual commercial transaction, I think are really, really important. I know we're going to talk about a whole load of those probably further through, but not all of them are in your control. Yeah. And sometimes you don't want them to be in your control, as I'm sure others will.
Yeah, and we've got an example from Jono coming up later on about Lego, but let's continue with John for the moment.
Yeah,
I love that example. So John,
thank you. So just to sort of wrap up here, we want to look at, are we claiming that knowledge panel? I can see here that there's maybe opportunity to claim that Semrush knowledge panel. Are we having maybe pages that we don't want to be showing up in site links? So just really looking at anything that we can control about this SERP. And then once we start to understand where there might be opportunity in our own, one of the places that we can look for that, which Jason actually sort of suggested here, is to look at your competitors' brand names, right? Do they have people also ask boxes? Are they tweeting enough that they have Twitter showing up in the top of search results? Do they even have a knowledge panel? As the case with, it seems like Search Metrics doesn't have one, Bright Edge and Moz do have knowledge panels. So looking out to your competitive set and having a better understanding of what types of SERP features they have. And actually, we'll be talking a little bit about SERP features and how we can leverage those in a minute, or sort of what numbers they're occurring in. But before we do, I wanted to sort of now start to think about, like, what are some of the ways that we can actually impact change, or what are some of the ways that we can optimize against some of these brand terms? And that's sort of it for me.
Okay, well, that's absolutely perfect. I mean, what we now have is what appears on your brand SERP, i.e. when somebody Googles your brand name, what do they see? Is it impressive? Is it interesting? Is it positive? Is it accurate? And how much can we affect that? And I think that's the focus for today. We've had a couple of questions already, in fact. Paid search, is that worth it on your brand SERP? I mean, some people pay for their own branded keyword, their own exact match branded keyword. Is it worth it? My figures show 16% of brands pay for their own keyword.
I mean, I would say it's definitely worth it if you have competitors doing it, and I would say there's probably benefits to doing so, even if not. For one thing, you learn a lot about like what brand terms people actually are interested in. You can start to get pretty varied about it. Another thing is that you can control the messaging better, right? If you have a sale going on, right, and you can't put your sale in your title tag and meta description and very easily control when that goes in and goes out. Otherwise, you'll have people saying like, "Hey, I saw the sale," and so there's a lot of benefits, I would say, to doing so. Dixon?
I'd say yes. I can see that there's a lot of point in doing that. I'm one of the 84% that tends not to, but that's because I'm a skinflint. But I think one of the things that I would say is on the reverse of that, you should be using DCMA legislation or trying to stop your competitors where you can. In some countries you can, in some countries you can't, but some countries you can stop people from bidding on your brand name, and if you can, I would try and do that, because your competitors being there isn't very nice. One of the problems I do have is that I quite often work with generic words in brands, and that gives a kind of generic problem, which maybe we can talk about a little bit sometime.
Yeah, sure, 100%. And the thing with that, protecting your brand name within specific markets requires two things. One is that you have the copyright in the country, and that you prove it to Google, and two, that somebody's already bidded on your brand name. And that's something that a lot of people don't know about Google Ads. Until somebody bids on your brand name and appears, you can't actually ask to have it removed. Oh, yeah, Jono's nodding. You've been in this situation.
Oh, we all have. Just agreeing along. I thought that was a really interesting point, that you have to wait until somebody's bid so it's reactive. But I also just wanted to say, it feels like a really artificial distinction to say, should I pay money for this bit and not for this bit? Like the ad slot at the top is an opportunity, as John says, to control the messaging, to have a banner, to have more real estate. You're also paying for the organic listings in your time and effort and content. It's just a different pot. And it's only your organizational structure that makes that look like an issue. It's just more advertising space. That's all the SERP is. If we're saying it's the business card, this is another piece. Why would you say because it's paid for by a different team that we're not interested? I think definitely go for it.
Oh, and sorry, that makes me think of another thing. Is it might actually be cheaper because it's quicker and easier. So
yeah, definitely. Day, maybe I mean, still do SEO, right? But
no, definitely still do it. I mean, sometimes brand campaigns can get very, very expensive. But for some of the small brands that we're talking about here, if you're like, why would I ever pay for my own brand name? For one thing, it can have a really, really, really strong return on investment, right? And regardless of the idea that you might have gotten that anyway through organic, we've done tests and we do sort of see a balance there.
Oh, I'm sorry, that just made me think about something else as well. With Google Ads, you can segment. So you can segment users who are already signed up from those who haven't signed up, those who have visited your site, and those who haven't, and you can actually optimize your message for the person. Whereas with the branded SERP, organic branded SERP, you have no opportunity to do that, and you're kind of trying to shoot all the bullets into all the targets at the same time. Yeah, that's my new thing that I just invented, Jono. Thank you very much. So that moves me on to the question from Simon Cox, which Jono wanted to answer is, who in an organization would you expect or hope to be the person managing the brand search terms?
I love this. This was such a great question. John said right at the beginning that isn't it unusual that SEOs don't often think about what happens after the purchase, and there's all the support and ongoing things and all of the how do we keep people and how do we keep them coming back, and that's very rarely part of anyone's job. And I think the answer to who owns this then isn't the SEO team who are KPI'd on the wrong things or the individuals doing that. It's everybody in the business. Because if you're Googling your brand name on Exact Match and the result, even if you're winning, even if it's great, but at the bottom of the page there is a 2-star review of your products or your customer service, then the thing you need to be dealing with is your products or your customer service. And all these different parts of the business have to be aware that they're contributing to what's on that search results page and how that's presented. And quite often that will mean that people have to think differently about what level of focus do we give, how customer-centric are we, what's the right balance between our cost of manufacturing and delivery and all these other bits. It's part of everybody's job because it all becomes transparent. And if you undercut in certain areas, that's going to show up on your search page and you're going to suffer for it.
But I think also that for me, the question also is, who is responsible? I think we all want to point the finger. Everybody's responsible for their little part, but who's responsible for the overall picture? Dixon, I'm sure you've got something.
No, I'm going to go with Jono on this, in that I think that if you're going to, I know, because I didn't want to have an argument with Jono, I don't lose. But in that, I think a company's employees should understand the brand. I mean, John started with that brilliant quote that, a brand is the sum of the parts of all the stories that the company has. And that includes each of the individuals within there. And but it does give a problem for larger companies. As the company gets larger, the problem becomes more complex, because every employee in that company should be believing in the brand, understand the brand values, and be able to react in a positive way publicly about something. If they see a 2-star review and they're in a position to answer them and say, well, I work for Amazon, jasonbarnard.com, whatever it may be, Yoast, they can reply and respond and get reasonable backing from the company. The problem that has is that the company has so many legal responsibilities these days that they have a tendency, as a company grows larger, to restrict what employees can say in public. And I think that that's a really big mistake for brands. I think brands need to get behind the fact that their employees may make mistakes. They may trip up a GDPR thing, hopefully not, but they need to train their employees well so that everybody can talk with confidence, knowing that they're not going to go over any boundaries. Then they need to be reasonably rewarded, emotionally rewarded for doing so, and not necessarily berated just because they've answered. And I don't think many brands like that idea. But if your employees don't talk about your brand, your competitors and your customers will.
Yeah. No, absolutely brilliant point. Really well said. I mean, moving on to a different topic, Jennifer Coate was asking, what's the best way to discover brand SERPs when you're an online-based company and you want to know how businesses look in different regions? And I think that's an incredibly interesting question, because brand SERPs are incredibly varied across countries. I've got a tracking tool, which I will now plug, called Polycube.pro, where I actually track across 5 different countries, and you see phenomenal differences between the brand SERPs in these different countries. So, Dixon, you were raising your hand.
I was saying I use well, if I want to get anonymous, I go to start page for .com because it's simple and it kind of takes out all the personalization. But I also use a VPN. There's lots out there. Tunnel VPN, Private Tunnel, Strong VPN, NordVPN. There's loads of them. And a VPN system can then allow you to actually look from the country, an IP address in the country that you're in. It doesn't completely fix your issues, but it's a good place to start.
And what I found, I mean, I've got NordVPN to plug a product that I actually really have got a lot of out of, is that I can switch between countries, and that's what I've been doing for research, is pinging from different countries and seeing how different the results are. I open an incognito window, boot up NordVPN, pick my country, look at the results, and I was looking at Yoast earlier on, and the results are actually quite, for an international brand, they're actually very different. And we'll see later. Actually, I'm going to present a little bit later with
that's exciting.
I use Mobile Moxie other VPNs also. But if you're sort of scared by the idea of setting up VPNs and all that stuff, Mobile Moxie is a great free. You can use certain free credits and get to some of those answers.
Well, I think the fundamental point there is when we're sitting at home searching on our browser with our search history and our location, we don't see what everybody else is seeing. We need to get out there and see what our real clients are seeing or our real prospects are seeing in different countries, especially as an international brand.
Yeah. And one point, earlier, to circle back around to the idea of whose responsibility this is, one thing that I wanted, maybe I did mention before, but brand SERPs, if you're looking to integrate SEO organizationally, if you're looking to get people in your organization excited about the concept of SEO, or to even start to understand SEO, getting everyone rallying around your brand name is a lot easier than getting everyone rallying around blue widgets, right? Because maybe that department doesn't care about blue widgets, right? Maybe that's not something central to how they're gold. But ultimately, the brand presence or the brand name really connects to the way that everyone in an organization is gold, and the way that, so I think that there's a lot of opportunity to bring the PR team to the table, to bring your PPC and your marketing and your media planning teams to the table. Like, think about the conversation that might have happened at Wayfair around Wayfair My Couch or Wayfair My Kitchen, right? Like, that was an SEO who did that. It had to have been. Right. And so think about where can you integrate these brand SEO discussions through your organization.
Okay, brilliant stuff. 2 very quick points. Matt B just pointed out, to be very clear, anybody can bid on your brand name at any time. The only thing that you can stop them doing is using your trademark in their copy.
True.
So be very clear about that. I think it's very important. And but the thing about that is, if they can't use your brand name in their copy, you're right at the top, or they're right at the top, the click-through rate will be awful, and their quality score will be very low. They will be paying an absolute fortune. So the fact that they can't use your brand name is actually a very big plus for you and negative for them. And Andy Simpson's now asked, my brand appears differently on mobile. Should we be checking both?
Yeah, absolutely.
Concentrate on one or the other. Go ahead, Dixon.
Well, if you're gonna select one, then concentrate on mobile for now. To be honest with you, but I think you definitely need both. But it depends a little bit on your industry as well. So, consumer brands, I think mobile is really, really important. Maybe, Yoast or Inlinks or Semrush can, more people are using, the desktop because they're a business to business technology. So I think it really depends on your brand.
Can I quickly come back to Annie McEwen said, Andrea Ugardi said, do you set the brand queries on Search Console or Google recognizes the brand name? And that was something for John, which is that you have to actually filter by your brand name, but then you can also filter, Dixon, if I might say so, on your individual brand by device and by brand name. John, sorry, you know loads about that, don't you?
Yeah, I guess, right? So basically for our monthly reporting, we use Data Studio. And so if you're just talking about in Search Console, you're only going to be able to put one brand term. So if you're someone like, I guess Yoast could work, but if Yoast was looking in their instance, right, and someone was searching WordPress SEO Premium, and they're like, well, for us, that's a brand term, right? They can't put that in the filter in addition to Yoast. You'd have to literally bring this over to Data Studio. Through Data Studio, you can use regular expressions. So you set it to literally the filter to regular expression and use bars and just like tick, 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 put all your keywords in there. And then you can set up really granular filters to separate out non-brand keywords and brand keywords, all, two slides within a Data Studio dash. And that's how we do it.
Brilliant. Can I be really rude and say that that's knowing too much? And that if you just look in Search Console and filter by plus with my brand name, and then filter by plus mobile, then you get the mobile search volume, and then you can know which one you need to focus on.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Sorry, that's bringing it right down to the basic level.
I think I misunderstood your question. If you're just looking to get a handle on where is happening more, Jason, that's the way I would approach.
Yeah, and if you really want to get jiggy with it, John's the way to go. Brilliant stuff. Right, what I would really like to do now is I was looking at some data earlier on. I've got 7,500 brands that I've been tracking for a couple of years now. And I've been looking at the rich elements. And what I find very interesting about brand SERPs is they have very few blue links. And I was interested, to show the data I've found, but also to ask you guys what you think about how we can best work to trigger all these different rich elements. Now, what I call rich elements is any of the new stuff we've got, anything that isn't the old traditional blue links, like knowledge graphs, knowledge panels, Twitter boxes, videos, images, feature snippets, and so on and so forth, which tend to dominate the brand SERPs, as we will see. Now I'm sharing my screen, and we have here Semrush. These rich site links, one would imagine that every decent brand has them, but in fact, less than half of brands in my data set have rich site links. And then if we keep going down this, the knowledge panel, which is Dixon's particular specialist subject, there are over 20% of brands that now have that knowledge panel. The exact data is very difficult to grasp, and I'm working on trying to get some more exact data, but it's about 20%, which is a big number. And we can talk about that very quickly after, or very more in detail afterwards, because actually having that knowledge panel makes you look incredibly professional. And the more I look at brand SERPs today, the more I see that when I don't see that knowledge panel, the more I think that brand isn't legitimate or isn't credible. Then we move on to people also ask. 33% of brand SERPs have people also ask. So when Google is showing you a brand SERP, it's also saying what else might you want to know? And those questions people also ask can be about your tool, and in this case, or sorry, your brand. And in this case, so it's all questions about Semrush, but it can also be more general questions about your industry, which could be owned by your competitors, which is kind of frightening. And that's going up and up. It went up from 29% in July to 33% today. Twitter boxes, I love Twitter boxes. If you search my name right now, you should see the Twitter boxes, and you should see that I tweeted that we are now live. And what I love about Twitter boxes is it's a method or a way for brands to give real-time information to anybody who is searching for them. And if you're an existing client or somebody who knows me, that becomes incredibly interesting. 11% of brands have these Twitter boxes. The other 89% simply don't have a decent Twitter strategy, in my opinion. And here's what I tweeted earlier on. Jono's laughing, so I think he's just seen it. It takes 17 seconds for me to post something to Twitter, get the Twitter box, and get what I want to show on my own brand set.
Wow, that's powerful.
It's amazing, and it's terribly simple. And it's fun as well. I mean, I enjoy doing it, and it's a really nice trick to play. If you look at videos, Semrush have got videos. 25% of brands have videos. The other 75%, in my opinion, don't have a decent video strategy and should perhaps start looking at it. If we don't have these video boxes, maybe we should start thinking about a video strategy. And if we look at Semrush's SERP, because they're so rich, they've got those rich site links, they've got the Twitter boxes, they've got the video boxes, there are only 5 blue links. We're now looking at a situation where instead of the 10 blue links we traditionally expect, there are only 5 blue links on a typical brand SERP. Top stories, I was actually looking at people like Microsoft. The number is 4% for top stories. Microsoft, Apple, Google, all these big companies will have these top stories, but I found Pure Wow, who I've never heard of, they have top stories because they produce an awful lot of content. So I don't think that's necessarily limited to big brands. And this is, I can't remember what they're called, Pure Wow. That's their brand. So once again, we've only got 5 blue links and an awful lot of rich content. And for me, Pure Wow suddenly looks like a credible, interesting company that I would want to do business with. Now we've come to Yoast. That was just for Jono.
Thank you. This is lovely.
Images come up an awful lot, but in fact, 6 months ago, it was 36%. Now it's 24%. Google seems to be getting bored with images and is tending to push other rich elements in its place. And Yoast SERP looks absolutely brilliant. I mean, for me, that's a very credible company, a company I want to do business with.
I definitely owe you some money.
Yeah. But we have 5 blue links and an awful lot of rich content that people also ask, the rich site links, the Twitter boxes, the images, and the knowledge panel that really help Yoast control their brand SERP and make them look incredibly good. And then I found this, which is related searches, and I desperately looked for a company that we don't necessarily know, Vidismo. Never heard of them, no idea who they are. Related searches is to do with the knowledge graph, and that's Dixon's specialist subject.
Not necessarily, Jason. You're over-egging my skill set here.
Well, what I have tended to see, and Dixon, we can talk about it afterwards, is related searches. Here we only have 3, and I suspect, and I don't know, but that's because Google hasn't yet understood enough entities related to Vidismo in that same ontology categorization that they can actually post here. But that's 12%. Yeah. And here what I'm trying to demonstrate is a small company can have those related searches and relatively few blue links, once again, with a relatively good-looking SERP. And I found this earlier on, and I was terribly pleased with myself because they have a featured snippet. 2% of brands have a featured snippet. So you might want to look at that. It's a very small case scenario, but definitely interesting to be looking at. So that was a really quick run through the rich elements that I've been looking at. And it's a great way to make our brand, our business card, look incredibly impressive. And if we look at images, I mean, Yoast posts loads of images, loads of videos. I've seen Yoast videos all over the place.
You're in about half of them, aren't you?
Since you invited me on, yes. But I'm going to actually deflect that to John, who knows all about video boxes. How do you get them? How do you trigger those video boxes to make yourself look great?
Yeah, well, I mean, all right. So obviously it's to create video content. We see that video content is predominantly coming up from YouTube. One opportunity you might have is to put that content on so put it up on YouTube, put it on your own website, mark it up with structured data so that Google explicitly knows that it's a video. And in that sense, you may get some of those carousels to point back to your website. But really, I would say, okay, so we have to create video. But when we look at that brand SERP for Semrush, right? If we go back to it, we don't have to pull it up on screen, but I believe it was like Semrush overview. And then it was like Semrush platform overview, something, something, something. And then the next one was keyword research, right? So if we think about sort of the hierarchy or sort of the order of questions that I'm going to have about Semrush, well, geez, those videos fit pretty nicely in terms of like the early on experience of someone being introduced to that brand, right? We have the overview, then Google's like, I don't know, you get this other overview video, I don't know what that's about, throw that in there. You know, most people who are beginners with keyword research or beginning a tool, or sorry, beginners with SEO or beginning using a tool, one of the primary places they're gonna go is to look for keyword research. That's like how we start our campaign. So Google knows that's at the beginning of the story. And so I would say that you have to think about what are those moments that are at the beginning of my brand story? And do I have video content that speaks to them? If so, I believe that Google may see those as a positive thing to put up in that search result. I would say that the traditional sort of like YouTube optimization things sort of ring true there. Like if no one ever engages with that video, no one ever watches that video, no one ever embeds that video, no one ever likes that video, and no one ever subscribes to your channel, you're probably not going to have a video carousel. So I would say that engagement, right? Having first off, producing the content. Secondly, having the right content fit to the intent of that query, which is going to be very high level. It's not like 5 reasons you should buy Semrush. And then, you know, you want to make sure that you're basically optimizing that content in the way that we would. So getting engagement.
Yeah, and you said a very important thing there, which is engagement. I mean, what Google is looking for to put on your brand SERP is something that's valuable, relevant, and useful to people who are searching a brand name. And engagement gives that value. It shows that value to Google. So any videos you've got, I've actually got a client who's got 5 pretty awful videos that they made themselves, and they've got 1,000 views, and nobody ever likes it. But the people who have liked it have been very relevant, and the engagement has been very relevant, and their videos are showing. No proof about that, but definitely engagement by a relevant audience is always going to be terribly important. Moving on to the knowledge panel, which is Dixon's favorite subject. Loads of questions about that. How do you get it?
So it's my favorite subject because you've got one and I haven't, Jason. That's the most annoying thing. So so the easiest way to get out of the box, get a knowledge panel is have a Wikipedia entry. I would say once you've got a Wikipedia entry, then your challenge to develop a knowledge panel is so much easier. Now, you don't have to have a Wikipedia agency, and yeah, so John's put in my own chat. What about Wikidata? So Wikipedia has a secondary side which is Wikidata, and you can start working on the data side of the Wikimedia set of companies and create an entity. What you have to do is get Google to understand that you are an entity in your own right, and that your brand is an entity in its own right. And it's not an easy thing to achieve. Dixon Jones is a really annoying one because there's this massive set of architects that design the Royal Opera House and goodness knows what, and they're a pretty big company. And it's been very much a frustrating thing for me that Google doesn't think I'm very important. I'm not very important. I get that I'm not important. I'm not at all important important compared to a large set of architects. But it's very annoying when I type in Dixon Jones and they've got knowledge panel. They've got a Wikipedia entry. They've got a number of other really good things that I can't compete with. It turns out my trip to see the Queen didn't count. That didn't work. That doesn't count towards my knowledge panel. So you can check whether you have an entity at all using the Google. And there's a tool out there that you can use to have a look at the knowledge graph with an API, and there's a web interface on Google. Maybe someone can get the URL up somewhere.
Two really quick points there. One of which is that there's a really easy interface that I built on CaliCube Pro to look at the knowledge graph and see what it throws back. And the second is, you were talking about not having a knowledge panel. If I remember rightly, Jono, you got your knowledge panel a couple of months back, and you claimed
I did. You bullied me into it. It was something that I was vaguely aware that I should do at some point, but never quite got round to it. I thought it was a really interesting process. So I was searching, I think, who is Jono Alderson? And there was like a picture that was a bit out of date and not very much info. And it took me maybe about an hour. I've just linked to my Wikidata page in the YouTube chat. I spent about an hour setting it up, and I said, I am a human male, which you think like good starting point, a British consultant. Here is my Twitter page. Here is my Crunchbase profile. Here is my LinkedIn URL. Here's my date of birth, a few other bits. And then within a day or so, suddenly there's this big rich knowledge panel, and it's got half a dozen images, and they're much more up to date. It's got a little biography. It's got you may also search for, and it's got people like Yoast and Matt Fishkin and some other people. And it's a really nice thing. As you say, it's really impressive. It validates me and my relevance and expertise. And it turns out I actually had all of the authority and relevance to have one. I just hadn't gone and essentially done the paperwork to achieve it. So definitely worth everybody going and doing that.
No, I love the point. I haven't done the paperwork necessarily, and that's what it really is that we don't all deserve a Wikipedia page, but we all do deserve a place in the knowledge graph. All we need to do is the paperwork. Dixon, go ahead.
I'd like to say going and doing it on Wikipedia is a very dangerous thing to do, as I found out to my cost in many years ago. In that, if you try and do it directly on Wikipedia and you have a financial interest, should we say, in the article that you're looking at or editing, then you are quite likely, unless you're an experienced and senior editor on Wikipedia, you're likely to get overturned by someone else. What is quite interesting is that there are senior editors all around the place that clearly, I think, do influence Wikipedia in particular, and possibly Wikidata as well. But I'm particularly worried about Wikipedia because I think that the bias in the system has gone quite extreme here. Not just because of the editors, although the editors are the root of the problem. So the editors are predominantly white, male, geeks and nerds, as we are, and will tend to talk about things like things that are of interest to them, and I think the ratio is 0.02% of Wikipedia users effectively edit or create Wikipedia articles. Now, you're not telling me that those people are creating things that they have no interest in all the time. They're doing that for a reason. So they are biasing the data set. And the real problem for that is that the knowledge base and the knowledge graph is then built off of that training set. So Google uses the Wikipedia data as does Inlinks actually as a training set for the rest of the system. And as it expands, if there was a small error at the start, it's just going to get bigger and bigger. And that is a real problem, I think.
You're 100%. I mean, Wikipedia is the training wheels, but I think what we've seen since last year, I mean, I was looking at the data that I've been collecting. I've called the update Budapest, and Google has let go of those training wheels to a certain extent, and we're getting a lot more sources and a lot more. I mean, Jono didn't have a knowledge panel until 2 months ago. And Wikipedia is no longer necessary, and I would love to see the community let go of that a little bit and start looking at what Jono's done, which is do the paperwork. It's actually just paperwork. It isn't, I'm notable, so I can be in Wikipedia. I've done the paperwork and I've joined all the dots. And Jono, there was a question very quickly there that you actually answered on the way through about, does the organization schema markup help? I mean, schema markup in general, I think you're going to be terribly enthusiastic. That's a really big help.
Yeah, it's definitely part of it. Anecdotally, I know when we first rolled out the new Yoast schema that we built, we rolled it out on our site before it hits the rest of the world. We rolled it out on Yoast.com, and the organization schema we had directly influenced and changed what was in our knowledge panel and a whole bunch of our brand SERPs. I can't remember off the top of my head the specifics. I can dig back through it later, but it enriched a whole bunch of stuff and changed some of the results, which is really nice. What's interesting, I guess, then is the question of how impactful that is. I know that different bits of Google are going in different directions on this. So some of the people you talk to are very much of the opinion that schema is going to power all of this, and all of this manual verification and filling out forms and doing paperwork is going to go away. The other half say exactly the opposite thing. So Google deprecated the social icons thing from the knowledge graph recently, where you used to say, here is my Twitter profile, here is my LinkedIn profile in your schema. They're saying they don't need that anymore because A, they can work it out themselves, but B, also people will fill in their Wikidata profiles and similar. So it feels a bit all over the place. So do both. Definitely go do the paperwork on Wikidata, etc., but also get top of the line schema so that you're covering all bases, because different bits of Google are going to read different bits, and who knows how it will come together.
Yeah. Would you still use same as?
Yeah, we do. Mostly because we've already got it in, and it feels sensible and useful to say, this is my website and my company, and here is also my Twitter and my others. Like that's good. That's helpful. And I think it's really important to remember with schema, this is a bit off topic, but there are other companies than Google who can and will consume Google schema. And if we're just doing the stuff that they explicitly reward, and that's not necessarily great for the open web.
There are two things I'd like to say. Number one is thank you, Gareth, for that lovely comment. Number two is that what I understand from Yoast is not necessarily the schema markup, but that Yoast is a trusted source about itself. And that's what I
yeah, that's nice.
In the knowledge panel is, for example, I mean, I was looking at, can't remember the name of the company. I've got a list of them where companies' about us pages are appearing in knowledge panels with the description they've given themselves. To the point of which Google is saying, I trust that person. And I did the test with Yoast schema markup FAQs, questions about myself on my own site, and I could get featured snippets in 5 minutes with information about myself. And I believe that's because Google trusts what I say about myself, because I have proven to be a reliable source over the years. Would you agree with that, Jono, or am I pushing it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that surprised me, right? Because on one hand, we know that Google are increasingly changing things like page titles and descriptions because they think they can do better. They recently changed the way that review schema works because they don't think that you can be trusted enough to have reviews of your own products without cheating. But yeah, then on the other side, bits of schema and Wikidata, you write your own bio and you are the authority, and they'll take it verbatim. So yeah, again, really weirdly different experiences in different parts of this ecosystem. Whilst you probably shouldn't be basing your business on chasing tactics that work today, there are certainly some bits that you can do that will definitely work, like getting these rich descriptions through your Wikidata stuff. So yeah, it's worth playing with.
I think sitelinks as well, they've taken away the ability for you to try and modify your own site links. Yeah. They've decided they can do better as well. But you still have got the search box, by the way. You can still put the search box into your site link search box, which I would recommend.
Does something the code for that by any chance?
Yeah, you get that automatically.
You can do that. I couldn't. Yeah, you can do it on Yoast. Yeah, no. I've got it on DixonJones.com. I've used the Yoast plugin. Nice. I've now put it in links, but I hadn't before. But I didn't use the Yoast plugin for that. I used the code. But yeah, you can do both.
And to finish this off, we've got a few minutes left. I mean, we've talked an awful lot about schema markup and Wikipedia and getting into the knowledge graph. I'd like to talk to you, Dixon, very quickly. Somebody asked about the Twitter boxes. How do we trigger those, or how do we start those? And I'd like you to link that, if I may, and pass it over to John, to an overall content strategy and social media strategy. Go ahead.
So the thing I'd say about the Twitter feed is that you've got to make it two ways. So you've got to put the schema in, Yoast plugin, brilliant. Put the Twitter profile in, stuff into your website. But then you've got to make sure that it goes to the Twitter handle, and then the Twitter handle has got to link back to the website. Otherwise, Google hasn't got any kind of verification in the system. So that's the easiest way to do it. You then just have to be a big enough brand and a big enough entity for Google to think that the Twitter results work. And one of the things you've got to do with that is make sure you use Twitter. As a lot of brands grab their Twitter profile, don't use it, and certainly don't add any value in the things that they're putting out there. And I think that there's, that's a basic necessity. So when it comes to tying it all together, it's not just the brand page of the Google business card. Behind the business card is all of those site links and rich snippets and news articles and all these other bits and pieces. They have meaning too. And it's not just about whether you get your news article or Twitter things. It's what those messages say, because when you're on Twitter, all you see is a Twitter feed. When you're on the Daily Mail, all you see is a Daily Mail feed. So you've got to use a wider approach than get your brand out of just being Google. Google is the head of the pyramid.
Yeah, well, which brilliantly brings us on to the last question of the day, which is for John, about a wider content strategy. I mean, the idea that you're going to appear as a Twitter box if you haven't tweeted for 6 months is completely ridiculous. You need to be active, but you also need an active content strategy if you want the video boxes or the image boxes that Yoast had, or the Twitter boxes that Dixon was talking about. John, wider content strategy to make that brand SERP your own.
Why have the content strategy?
No. Not why have it. Why have it?
Oh, okay, so why have it, I would say, is to go back to some of those earlier points about nurturing and providing answers for your own audience, right? So these are people who are either going to convert or already have converted. So you should do your best to support them, whether that be through video content, whether that be through keeping them updated with the latest on your Twitter, but then also thinking about, what are the other types of information pages that I could have ranking in this search result. We talked about that, exact match SERP for the brand name. And of course, your homepage is going to rank there, but think about what other types of pages, do you have a really awesome about page? Are you making your about page also rank for your brand SERP? Is that something that's applicable for you? Might not be, might be really great. So I would say think about the pages on your website that tell your brand story, and make sure that you're optimizing those against your brand name and try to get those to rank for your brand terms.
Yeah, I mean, because they'll pop up in the site links every time. And Dixon was saying we don't have control. We definitely can create quality content on interesting pages, or pages that will be interesting for anybody searching our brand name. And that will be the login page, the About Us page, the blog homepage, or even our major product pages, and getting those rich site links by optimizing those pages, which we would tend not to think as SEOs as being important. They are actually very important in the context of a brand SERP. Yeah. That was absolutely brilliant. We've run through our time of an hour. I had loads of questions set up to ask you all, and we didn't get to any of them. So I'm terribly disappointed. But I think we've got.
Let's do another one.
Let's do another one. Brilliant. And in fact, there is another one, but about local search, where here we're talking about Google is my business card, perhaps my homepage. If somebody is searching for me before starting to do business with me, we could perhaps view it as our homepage because it's the first thing somebody sees about my brand when they're researching me. But in local search, it really is your homepage. So today we've talked about national, international brands, getting in the knowledge graph, the knowledge panels, brilliant stuff. And I think we could indeed schedule another. Jono would be back, Dixon would be back, and John would be back to do a second hour of this. And the next one is all about the brand SERP for local search with Greg Gifford, Andy Simpson, who's just made a comment, and Claire Carlisle, which is going to be specifically for local brands, which is going to be really interesting. So absolutely perfect. I thought that was wonderful. Thank you, Dixon. Thank you, Jono. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
You've been amazing. I couldn't have done it better if I'd been on my own.
Thank you to everyone who joined us.
Yeah, thanks to the Semrush team behind the scenes as well. Good work.
Yeah, good stuff, guys.
Brilliant. Yeah, Anton's been absolutely great. I love the comments and the questions. They were absolutely ace. Thank you, Anton. So,
thank you so much.
See you next time for another one, guys.
See you later.
Bye.
Thank you, Anton. Thank you, Jono. Thank you, Dixon. Thank you, John.